Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation's LNTV. I'm your host Mark Angelides. Today we're joined by Mr. Tim Donner. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Mark.
So Tim, it's all up in the air for Miss Elizabeth Warren, the Massachusetts senator who appears to be going strength to strength. Where in particular has Senator Warren gained strength?
Well, you know, Mark, it's mostly showing in the national polls, right, which you wonder to what extent a national poll really matters, because these primaries are done state by state. Elizabeth Warren is looking good in Iowa, but she's still well behind. She's looking very competitive in Massachusetts. Of course, that's her own state. She's second there. But let's go to New Hampshire, because, of course, that's the first primary state. And that's a very competitive race. That's the state just north of where Pocahontas, resides in Massachusetts. And she is competitive there, but so is Bernie Sanders. And you look at Massachusetts, Pocahontas is not competitive in the South, in South Carolina. So really, this is showing up more in national polls and apparently in the betting odds, where Pocahontas is now actually easily surpassed Joe Biden as the leader among the gamblers, as you so accurately pointed out in your piece, Mark. So I think it's more of a general perception that Pocahontas is on the rise. She's getting bigger rallies. Her national numbers are high. Her statewide numbers have not yet reflected her surge.
Okay, I mean, clearly the person who's suffering here, because Biden, as you mentioned, South Carolina, all down that East Coast area, that's very much Biden territory. So the real question is, what's going to happen to Bernie? I mean, will he go quietly into that long good night if and when the time comes that Warren has, let's say, consolidated the Progressive Party base?
Well, it's pretty clear at this point that Bernie and Pocahontas have had a sort of non-aggression pact. Neither one has criticized each other at all. And you think this is probably largely because they see the world almost exactly the same way, and they feel that they're protecting it against the dangerous moderates and old-time liberals in the party who aren't down with the progressive cause. But let's face it, eventually only one of them can advance. So the question is, what will Bernie do if it's clear, as it appears to be becoming more and more clear, that Pocahontas is the one that really stirs the passions of the bulk of the progressive base? And I say that while acknowledging that Bernie still has a hard core of support, but he's been unable to expand that support, unlike Elizabeth Warren, who started low, but is the only one really in the race, Mark, who's actually gained any strength as this race has gone along.
I mean, when there are a lot of course, long shot progressives in the candidates field at the moment. Once they start dropping out, do you think, and they obviously start to coalesce, will Biden be able to withstand the pressure when it's down to just two or three candidates? Will he be, because he's clearly on the more moderate side, will he be able to stand against the progressives as they coalesce around the last 2-3 candidates?
Well, in a sense, Mark, this is Biden against the world, isn't it? Because he's the lone moderate, he's called a moderate. He's not a moderate. He's a liberal, but he's an old-time liberal. He's a 20th century liberal. And there's no doubts about whether Joe Biden loves his country or not. And that seems to be a very low standard. Joe Biden doesn't hate the country, whereas it appears that Bernie and Pocahontas want to tear everything down and start all over. But look, there's simple mathematics here, Mark. You've got Joe Biden at 30% and all the rest combined at 70%. So the question becomes, when all of these progressives like Cory Booker and Beto O'Rourke and Julian Castro drop out, as they will, where's their support going to go? Of all the candidates who are almost certain not to be nominated and who will drop out, I can think of only Amy Klobuchar and perhaps Andrew Yang, whose support would go to Biden. So I don't see how the math works for Biden unless suddenly the more rank and file moderate Democrats come out and participate in the primary and overturn this stark progressive turn of their party.
Well, speaking of the electoral math or psephology, as we call it this side of the pond, I believe you were the first pundit to predict that Donald Trump would take 2020 with around 350 electoral college votes. Now, you showed in a great series of articles how that would actually come about on libertynation.com. But based on what's happening with Elizabeth Warren, will her movement, her rise here, do you think that will affect that 350 estimate?
I think if anything, it would increase that estimate, Mark. If it was Biden, I don't think that estimate would be increased, and it might be reduced slightly. But again, I don't see how Biden survives the primary given the progressive bent of the party. Nevertheless, when Biden is taking on these candidates, 19 of them, almost all of whom are progressive, it makes it look like he's got, a lot of support and a solid lead. He's 10 points ahead. But here's the problem with Elizabeth Warren. The biggest problem with Elizabeth Warren, on top of the fact that she pretended to be an Indian and that's going to be brought out to great embarrassment to her if she's a nominee, is that she has no appeal to black voters. And you see this in the South Carolina polls that show her way behind Joe Biden, who's just crushing everybody else. In the very important South Carolina primary, which gets overlooked because of New Hampshire and Iowa, but in South Carolina, where the black vote is the largest, or one of the largest of the entire primary race, she's not doing well. And if she cannot motivate black voters to get out and vote for her, and she cannot convince the people in the heartland that they should give up their health care and we should basically get rid of fossil fuels, basically strip the entire economy down and start all over again. If she can convince heartlanders that's a good idea and she can start to attract black voters, maybe she's got a shot. Otherwise, 350 electoral votes for Trump could be a conservative estimate.
Well, I hear she has a plan for that.
Yes, she's got a plan for everything. And as much as we mock her for it, Mark, I think we should appreciate that she's out there talking about exactly what she would do, although she doesn't talk about how she would pay for it, but she's got an answer for everything.
Yes, in much the same way that my pets at home seem to have an answer to everything. It's not necessarily a good one, and it's certainly not one that convinces me on many occasions. But Tim, thank you ever so much for your insight on this. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Mark. Always a pleasure.
And thank you to you at home for watching. If you enjoyed this, if you got a little something out of it, you can either click the subscribe down below, or you can head over to libertynation.com, where we've got a whole host more television shows, more articles, more podcasts, and radio. Check us out at libertynation.com. Thanks very much.